With the Acolytes swiftly incoming and the trailers already starting to arrive, a lot of our thoughts over at Devoted Bard have been turned to the topic of Jedi. They're one of the core elements of Star Wars, and part of what makes it so very special. They're also an incredibly large element, and very complex, with so many facets to their lore that covering it all in a single video would be a Herculean task. And a foolish one, since some of that lore is likely about to change anyway. However, we do want to talk about them, and so my brother has given me permission to talk about one of the smaller details, one that when I was younger used to bother me to no end. Why do the Jedi not wear armor? The funny part is, that's sort of a deceptively simple question to answer. The Jedi don't wear armor because they don't need it. A Jedi's greatest asset is the Force, and the superhuman speed and reflexes that it gives them. Any kind of armor would be superfluous when the guy wearing it is easily capable of slapping blaster bolts out of the air with his sword. Plus, it might even slow them down, making it more likely that the Jedi in question is hit in the first place. And as it is here on Earth, the best armor is always not getting hit at all. So that explains it then. The Jedi never wear armor. It just wouldn't be useful to them. Ah, right. Well then. Okay, so the Jedi do wear armor sometimes, but why would that be? Well, the biggest clue is when we see the Jedi donning armor. It is always during a time of great conflict. For Jedi, armor is a second line of defense. Their ability to dodge and evade incoming blaster fire is a far better defense against it than absorbing the hit on an armor plate. But that first method is fallible. If a Jedi gets tired, makes a mistake, or is just entirely overwhelmed, a couple of blaster bolts might slip through, and if you're only wearing a set of regulation Jedi robes, one blaster bolt could spell the end for you. So, in times of war, when those sorts of situations are more likely than not, you do see some Jedi deciding to supplement their defenses with a couple of pieces of armor. And depending on the length and scale of the bloodshed, Jedi armoring can get quite extensive. Back in the days of the Old Republic, for instance, it was not uncommon at all to see Jedi fighting in full, heavy armor, with what looks like enough sheer mass of metal to give your average medieval knight a run for their money. Although, even at this time in history, there were still plenty of Jedi who favored speed and lightness over protection, and for good reason. Jedi are generally trained and equipped with a focus on fighting their principal rivals, the Sith, and back in the Old Republic that made a lot of sense. After all, there were a lot of Sith to deal with, and Jedi were one of the only good answers to that threat. But during the High Republic, which the Acolyte seems to take place in, even at the end of it, there are no Sith. So why are the Jedi not adapting? If your primary threat is blaster fire from groups of thugs in the Nil, why not go with the slightly slower but more reliable defense that is wearing armor? Deflecting incoming fire with your lightsaber is all well and good, but even just a small mistake might result in your death. Heck, you don't even have to make a mistake. If 3 blaster bolts come in at the same time, there can be a situation where there is no angle you can move your lightsaber to deflect them all, and then you're becoming one with the Force. So why not wear at least a little armor? Well, at the time of the Acolyte, I think it mostly comes down to dogma. After a millennia of peace, the Jedi were a stagnant order. They were very slow to change and very preoccupied with matters of internal status. So if you were a Jedi that saw the benefits of wearing armor and decided to give it a try, there was a good chance that other Jedi would look down on you, thinking you were admitting that your skills were lacking and that you needed armor to make up for your lack of strength with the Force. That's a stupid thought, but peer pressure is like that. So the Jedi remained unarmored until a crisis big enough to make them swallow their pride came along and bashed them over the head until they put on a pauldron. But let's say for a minute that you were a Jedi. I know you won't fall to peer pressure, you're too sensible. So what sort of armor would you wear? What kinds of armor would even make sense to wear? Well, let's talk about that. The first thing to consider is mobility. Your main strength as a Jedi is your speed and agility, so any kind of armor that compromises that agility should be thrown out. That means that heavy armor, like the Phase 1 Clone Trooper armor, is probably out. The restrictive and unergonomic joints just won't allow for that kind of movement that you're going to want to be able to do. Now, if you want heavy armor, you can go for a custom piece to allow for your freedom of movement without compromising protection over much, but that's still not necessarily recommended. So what about medium armor? Well, that would make quite a lot of sense. A simple set of greaves, gauntlets, and a chest plate can go a long way towards increasing your survivability without impacting your fighting ability. And since Jedi are regularly able to ignore the pain and damage caused by non-lethal blaster fire, thanks to their Force abilities, this is probably the best route. As for light armor, it's still useful, but without adequate protection for your torso, you'd still be vulnerable to a stray shot slipping past your defenses and rendering you combat ineffective in one hit, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So, medium armor is probably best, though I do defer to you, Master Jedi, should you prefer another alternative. Now we should talk about materials. If you have the resources, my first suggestion would be to make your armor out of Beskar. It is light, sturdy, and incredibly resistant to both blaster fire and lightsaber strikes. This would allow you to take a couple of hits even from a Sith Lord, as well as innumerable gangs of thugs with blasters. The only problem is it is incredibly rare, and it's also considered a birthright to the Mandalorian people, so you might well end up with Mandalorians hunting you down across the galaxy to reclaim your armor. Still, if you're okay with that, then I can heartily recommend this material, as it is nearly perfect for all of a Jedi's needs. If Beskar is unavailable though, then we need to discuss priorities. If you think that it's likely that you're going to go up against a lot of lightsaber-wielding opponents, and you want extra protection from those opponents, we could go for Kotorsis. Its lightsaber-resistant properties are well documented, and your vital organs will be much more protected from sudden stabs with a plate of this covering them. Still, if you're not absolutely sure you need it, I would stay away. Kotorsis is extraordinarily brittle, and could shatter easily if you get hit with any kind of heavy impact. It also fails under repeated point strikes, so it wouldn't fare well against a barrage of laser fire either. So I would recommend a rather simple combination of plastoid and synthweave, the same sort of base material as clone armor. This would allow you to absorb a few additional hits from blaster fire without immediately going down. Additionally, the stuff is quite lightweight, allowing you to flip and jump across the battlefield like a hawkbat while still being assured of your continued survival. The downside is this type of armor is less than useless against a lightsaber, but your best counter to that kind of threat is your own lightsaber skills anyway. So, Master Jedi, what'll it be? Did I miss anything? Is there something more unique you'd like me to acquire for you? Or would you like to go with my recommendation? And of course, there's always the matter of color. Tell me everything, Master Jedi. There's nothing I can't get for you if you ask. It's a dangerous galaxy out there after all. One cannot be prepared enough.